Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Safe Travels podcast. My name is Joey. Today, I'm at Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve in southern Colorado, and I have the pleasure of sitting down with park ranger and wildlife biologist Dewane Mosher. Dewane has done some incredible work in this park, and in our conversation, we talked all about the amazing fish restoration story that's occurred here at the Great Sand Dunes. Dewane, you are a biologist here at Great Sand Dunes National Park, and I'm super excited to talk to you because we're going to talk about fish in an environment where you wouldn't ordinarily expect fish to be.
Yeah, it turns out that this big old pile of sand is a great barrier to keep other fish out. So native species have been able to flourish over geologic time here. So,
You've had an interesting journey to the National Park Service and becoming a biologist. You first started in the Army and then went to school after the Army to become a biologist. What was that journey like?
Okay, yeah. So as a high school kid, I actually joined the Army for college money, thinking that I would get out after 4 years, and I wound up making a career out of the Army. Spent 20 years as a mechanic with the U.S. Army, and I got out. I needed to figure out what in the world does a 38-year-old retiree do. So that's what I did. Was I went back to school, got a degree in wildlife biology, and got a job here at Great Sand Dunes after a couple of other seasonal jobs with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Park Service.
So why biology for you? Did it start as a young kid? Did you go out fishing with your family as a kid?
Oh, absolutely. I grew up as a fisherman and a hunter, kind of, you grow up in the 70s and the 80s, pre-internet. That's what we did. We had to go outside and entertain ourselves. But my father and my grandfather always took me out fishing, and we enjoyed the outdoors. And it being from Georgia, went out deer hunting and procured our own free-range organic sustenance that way. So,
I'm always curious the dynamic between now you being a wildlife biologist, and a lot of your job here at the Park Service is to protect and preserve the wildlife in the park. But coming from a hunting background, have your philosophies changed over time?
Not really. I think if you were to look into the background of a majority of the biologists throughout the federal and state governments, that there's probably a majority of people come from the hunting and fishing background. I think it's people from that background get very interested in animals and animal behaviors at a really young age, I think. So,
do you have a primary species of wildlife that you've admired and studied the most or wanted to study throughout your career?
Currently, my expertise at the park is probably ungulate biology more than anything else. So the elk, the deer, and the bighorn sheep and the pronghorn. Focused mostly on the elk because that's where our management problems lies with large numbers of elk at the park. So,
and what management problems come with large numbers of elk being in the park?
So we have sensitive habitats, which here are the woody riparian habitats. So the streamside habitats, where willows and cottonwoods grow, and with large numbers of ungulates on the ground, they can suppress regrowth and basically extirpate the woody riparian tree species from the park. That's our number one problem.
Well, I talked about it in the beginning. We're going to talk about fish in this episode, and it's an interesting landscape to talk about fish. But what type of native fish species are there here at Great Sand Dunes?
Okay, so here at Great Sand Dunes, we're in the Upper Rio Grande Basin, and basically we have three species of endemic fish to the Upper Rio Grande Basin. They're not endemic to Great Sand Dunes per se, but the Great Sand Dunes lies in the San Luis Valley at the headwaters of the Rio Grande. So all these fish have millions of years of separation from other fish of their type, because we're in this basin at the Rio Grande Basin, which starts here and exits out in the Gulf. So what we have Rio Grande cutthroat trout, Rio Grande suckers, and Rio Grande chubs, and these were the primary fish species. So the Rio Grande Basin is not in the upper portions of it is not a highly diverse area. So we just had those three species plus like fathead minnows and long-nosed dace, which are they're all over the place. So they're not endemic to here. But those were the primary 5 species at the time of European contact. Those 5 fish were pretty much what's up here. So
how has the fish species in this area changed over time since settlers came here?
So yeah, at the time of European settlement here, I think the upper Rio Grande Basin, we got a lot of miners and settlers, agriculturalists. So the native fish species were extirpated from, in the case of the Rio Grande sucker, chub, and cutthroat, from over 90% of their historic range. And that was primarily people gathering them for food or changing water practices, so diverting water for irrigation, things like that. So what we wound up with in by probably the 1920s is these fish were extirpated over the majority of their range. And what happened after that was, with the advent of the railroads coming in, all these fish were gone. So there were streams all over the place, main stem of the Rio Grande, almost no fish there. So what they did was they brought in fish that were familiar to European Americans, brook trout, brown trout. They brought in cutthroat trout from other areas because there weren't any cutthroat to stock from this area. And what they didn't understand at that time was that those fish were, say, Yellowstone cutthroat from the greater Yellowstone region. And that drainage drains out into the Pacific Northwest. They brought in Colorado River cutthroat, and those fish drain out of the Gulf of California. I mean, that drainage goes all the way to Southern California and into Mexico. And they didn't realize that they were translocating fish that didn't belong here, or if they did know that, it wasn't their primary concern was to keep native fish here. So that's something that's generally become a priority for conservationists over the last probably 50 years. So,
and what is the harm in introducing non-native species here beyond eliminating the native species?
Eliminating the big one is like our primary fish of concern here in the park, in the mountainous area, which is the Rio Grande cutthroat. It basically does not exist well with brown trout or brook trout, and we've had brook trout here in the past. Hopefully we've extirpated those, but they don't compete well. So the brook trout are a fall spawner, and so they have their babies under the ice, and those fish have a big leg up on a spring spawning fish, like a Rio Grande cutthroat. So those fish spawn, so you might actually have brook trout, small brook trout predating on cutthroat eggs in the springtime when they were just born in the fall. Things like that. Just in general, they just don't coexist well. Anytime you have cutthroat trout cohabitating with brook trout, it always ends poorly for the cutthroat trout. So
That's fascinating. When you relocate a fish from the greater Yellowstone ecosystem into this ecosystem, are you also introducing potentially diseases that come along from that stream, or?
We work. We don't do a lot of this at the park level, but we work with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and they have fish pathologists. When we do any kind of reintroduction, there's a lot behind it. We do sampling and pathology on all those fish before we bring anything in here. So they come from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, so hatcheries generally, and they're very thorough on fish epidemiology and
Do fish that are in their native streams, do they develop modifications to live in that habitat? And so when you introduce a fish from outside of this habitat, are they not genetically adapted to survive here?
Oh, that's a pretty good question, and that's it's probable. So in our reintroduction efforts in Sand Creek over on the other side of the dunes here, we have we've stalked maybe 50,000 fish into that stream, and our thought is that maybe 10% of those are surviving.
Wow.
So and over time, that it's a definite probability that these fish that have the right genetic material, that have the right adaptations, are surviving more over time. So it's just a basic natural selection model. So we bring in 50,000 fish, 5,000 of them survive and reproduce, and those fish were the ones with the genetic adaptations that were needed in this area. So
when they spawn, will those fish have those adaptations?
Yes, yeah, definitely. That'd be the over time. You'd wind up with what you'd call an ecotype. Even though these are all genetically Rio Grande cutthroats, you'd have a Medano Creek ecotype that has all the right adaptations, and maybe a Sand Creek ecotype that has all those adaptations. And we even have different habitats within these drainages. We have Medano Lake at the headwaters of Medano Creek, and those fish would have different selection pressures than the stream fish. And we have Sand Creek lakes. There's 3 lakes over there in Upper Sand Creek, and they would definitely have different selection pressures than the stream fish. So I think they all get very locally adapted. So
with the streams and lakes that you just had mentioned, with their terminus being here at the valley floor around these sand dunes, what does their life cycle look like? How are they maneuvering through their streams and lakes to survive?
So I think the story on that probably goes all the way back to the Pleistocene. So, 10,000 years ago, these streams probably met up down here in an area called San Luis Lakes, at the San Luis Creek drainage, the Sawatch Creek drainage, and this Sand Creek, Medano Creek drainage is probably all met up down by San Luis Lake here. But with changes in the water regime in the San Luis Valley due primarily to agricultural diversion of Sawatch Creek and San Luis Creek, there's no water at the foot of the dunes. Even during our wettest years, these streams never meet up anymore. So what we have here is a perfect opportunity for species conservation in the face of invasive species, because they have no route in here. So what's really cool is we don't have a route for brown trout, brook trout, or any other invasive species to get into these fish. If a human being would have to carry those fish in there. So what we have here is like a genetic repository of Rio Grande cutthroat trout, Rio Grande chubs, and suckers here. So, and they're fairly safe. So safe from invasion from invasive species, so from exotic fish.
So the scenario that you played out earlier in this podcast of the railway having people drop off, bring their own fish, put them in the pond, that would be the scenario that would impact these fish again.
That would be the only way for invasives or exotics to get into this ecosystem. So, and hopefully people are more educated, and we're past that. So.
How do these fish survive? What do they feed on in order to thrive? You had mentioned that these fish communities are thriving here at Great Sand Dunes.
Primarily the Rio Grande cutthroat are probably living on insects, so aquatic insects, aquatic invertebrates, basically. So, those aquatic invertebrates are living on organic matter, plant matter and other things in the algae and things like that. So the whole food chain starts really low, and it ends with the cutthroat.
One of the things you hear a lot here when you come to the national park is seasonal flow, and visitors can interact with Medno Creek and Sand Creek. How does seasonal flow change the life of the fish in these creeks? Do they make their way down to the sand dunes when flow is heavy?
They can, and just an interesting story. We had a day, my kids and I, my young ones, Jenna and Mylan, we were down here at Castle Creek at the park, and we found several stranded fish right there at the kind of the terminus where the water started getting really shallow, and that's what we did. We saved some fish that day. Just got a bucket and found them and took them upstream. So yeah, but the water here in Medno Creek generally stays perennial all the way to about that Castle Creek area, and that's the only time I've seen any of the fish stranding, but I'm sure it happens because I saw at least one example of it, so I'm sure it happens all the time when I'm not there. So, but that's just a very small number of fish probably, and there's about 9 stream miles. No, actually 12 stream miles. 12 stream miles of the main stem of Medno Creek. That's great fish habitat. In some cases, I think we've done some sampling, over 1,500 fish per mile. So that's a lot of fish. So the population's fairly large and robust, and yeah.
When did the restoration process begin here in the park?
So the Medno Creek restoration was done prior to the formation of the park. On former Forest Service land by Colorado Parks and Wildlife back in the 80s. So, they removed the non-natives and restocked with, luckily for us, really good genetically pure Rio Grande cutthroats. So, and since then, the park has been working with Colorado Parks and Wildlife to come up with a plan. It was a long process, took years and years to come up with a plan to do Sand Creek, which is a larger, about 4 times larger base flow creek than Medno Creek. And it's basically mostly in a wilderness area. So there was a lot of logistics in getting that done. So, so that the initial treatment to remove non-natives was in 2019, and we've been working the whole thing since then. Right now, what we have in Sand Creek is above a barrier in the upper part of the drainage. We have done all our restoration work. We've removed the non-natives and then restocked the natives in that part of it. And then just last year, we did a reclamation on the lower portion of the creek. And what we'll be doing this summer, my technicians and I have 2 2 biological technicians, along with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Trout Unlimited, organization called Running Rivers. We'll be down there doing environmental DNA testing on the lower portion of that creek, looking for exotic fish DNA to make sure that we have all the exotic fish out of there so that we can restock Rio Grande cutthroats and Rio Grande suckers down in the lower portion of the Sand Creek drainage, the final 8 miles of it. So, and that'll be truthfully for me, that's a career accomplishment. It's a big deal for me anyway. Been working on this for about on and off for almost 10 years now. So
I was going to ask how restoring these beautiful places to their natural state makes you feel, and if you feel any sort of connection to the fish in that way, to see them thriving in the communities that they historically have always belonged to.
It's it's like the most important thing for me from a conservation perspective. It's the most important thing that I can do is do these big legacy projects that will outlive me, hopefully by hundreds of years. It's like, so yeah, it's a really big deal to me to be able to just contribute to these big projects with all the other partners and get these things done. I mean, basically, a lot of the labor and it's not mine. It's a lot of my role in this was planning and bringing people together, bringing all the people that have the expertise and the equipment and the fish. That's bringing all those people together. So it's working well with your neighbors and your partners is the important thing about getting a big project done like this. The Park Service did, me, my boss Fred Bunce, the chief of resources. We've been working on this. We definitely didn't do it alone. We had lots of great help. Specifically, Esteban Vigil, who's the state's native fish, or the state's local fish biologist, the area fish biologist. So, yeah, worked with him extensively. Plus, Trout Unlimited guys, Kevin Terry, Andrew Todd from Running Rivers, who's given us a lot of NGO support, giving us money, and allowed us to spend money that wouldn't have been easy to get from the federal government. So,
I think that's just a good life lesson there of working together and accomplishing amazing things like you and your team have been able to accomplish here at the park.
Yep. You want to do big things, you have lots of partners. So,
yeah. And what's the process like after restoration? I've always been amazed to read about these restorations, whether it's dam removals and stream restoration, that once you kind of restore it back to its normal state, the natural cycle of the wild kind of takes over from there and kind of maintains itself. Is that the case with these fish, or do you have to be actively involved?
Oh, absolutely. No, we've had, so the big example of that for me here at the park was Rio Grande suckers in Medano Creek. So we spent years and years stalking fish every year with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And these fish, they come from the hatchery. They're great fish, but we had very little success in seeing them survive and reproduce on their own. They would survive, but we had no natural reproduction. But over just like what you were talking about, adaptations, I think over the 10 years or so that we were stalking over and over and over, we finally got some to take that were capable of reproducing, and now we're not stalking anymore. So those fish, hopefully, those fish will be here for generations without any intervention from humans. So, and luckily for us, the cutthroat trout, this is such great habitat. The cutthroat trout, they immediately just take off and spawn the first year when we put them in generally. So they're great. So, but those those little suckers, or it took them a while to figure things out. And I think what the ultimate thing, that it might not even have been the fish that caused it. We had a big explosion in beaver activity and beaver ponding in that area where we found the natural reproduction. And it may be that the beavers altered that ecosystem to the point where those Rio Grande suckers really had a good habitat to spawn in at that point. So, but there's no telling. That's my speculation. So,
It's fascinating. You mentioned a couple of different species of fish in the park, including the cutthroat and the sucker. What are the biological differences between those fish? What are they characteristics wise? What's the difference between them?
Okay, so those Rio Grande suckers are they're a bottom dwelling species that's probably eating some plant matter, some invertebrates, but I think they're just a bottom dwelling kind of a slower species. They're not important to a lot of people, but because they're not a species that you're going to catch on hook and line very often, but they're a part of the natural system here. So, and the trout are just they're very much like other trout other places. They're feeding on invertebrates in the water column. They're not feeding just on the bottom. They're feeding off the top and the middle of the water column. So, and they just they're very old species. So, and they require really good quality water. So, highly oxygenated cold water. They're the main requirements for Rio Grande cutthroat trout. So, and the fact that they do so well here speaks a lot about our quality of water here at the park. So,
does the environment here, does it get warm during the summer? Do they struggle more in the summer than they do in the colder months?
In the mountains, those that stream has a lot of spring inputs, probably bringing in water in the 50-degree range. So we've actually found in Sand Creek, when we did the classification to decide whether we were going to do the restoration there, we actually found some waters in the upper portions of these watersheds where the water was too cold for cutthroats. So I think that long term, that speaks well for the persistence of these fish, even if conditions do change over time. So,
is there any other interactions with these fish in this park, whether it's other animals feeding on them or other interactions they have with other species in the water themselves beyond what they feed on?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a lot of fish being predated on in the lakes up high. We probably have eagle predation, maybe a little in the streams. We might have a little black bear predation, but generally, I think they most of the fish that reach adulthood probably survive until they've their life's run its course. But yeah, as far I can't think of any big predation events that we'd be seeing here. So,
how old do these fish usually live if they aren't taken on by another animal?
From everything I read, it's 8 to 10 years. So, so these fish, when they're probably starting to spawn as 2 or 3 year olds, and they're probably spawning every year for about 5 years. So, they're not like salmon. They survive and reproduce after each spawning event. So,
do you work with geologists or hydrologists in the area or at the park to look at seasonal flow or to look at different events in the mountains or here at the sand dunes to determine future events for these fish?
We have a park geologist, Andrew Valdez, and he's our physical scientist, so he works as our hydrologist. He's a geologist by training, but here at the park, he does tons of hydrology. And, the truth is we don't have a lot of control over the hydrology, over the flows we have from year to year. It's very climate dependent and it's very cyclical. So what we do is try to just try to make sure that we're protecting their habitat from other influences, and we kind of have to let nature take its course on whether we have water in the streams or not. So not much we can do about it, which is it's sad when it happens. I think right now we're seeing a super low water year, but luckily I think for these fish we have resiliency built into this system. So in the form of those spring inputs that keep the water at a reasonable temperature for cutthroats. So
when you look at the restoration story here in this park, do you get inspired by it, knowing that these types of events not only happen here, but happen across national parks all across the country?
Oh, I'm lucky to be able to engage with a big Rio Grande cutthroat conservation team, including biologists from the state of Colorado, the state of New Mexico, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Forest Service from several different forests in the Rio Grande Basin. And we all have it's just a big cohort of people working on the same problem. And it's when we get together, it's everybody gets to, we get to toot our horn to one another and what we've got accomplished. It's really, there's a big community, and I think everybody that's in that community gets a lot of job satisfaction from knowing that we're doing these projects that might last for hundreds of years. So, and that we're undoing some of the damage that humans have done in the recent past. So I think that's a big plus for everybody in the community. So.
Yeah, I just love your story of being a mechanic in the Army to wanting to be a part of projects that are bigger than you. Not that you weren't part of the Army, obviously you were there too, but that you have this passion for chasing things that will outlive you. And, I think our duty as human beings is to understand our natural landscape and be able to learn enough about it to be able to help it and allow it to thrive.
Me personally, that'll be the biggest accomplishment in my life that'll probably outlive me, except for, outside of my children. So, so hopefully this is everything we're doing is going to work out long term. So,
Are your children into biology?
Oh, I think, my youngest, my youngest son, I think he always talks about going into biology, and always ask him whether he wants to, do that or have some money, so, yeah.
That's awesome. What about fishing in the park? We talked a lot about fish. There's amazing ways to recreate in this park, but is fishing one of those ways?
Fishing is one of the ways. Currently in the Medno Creek drainage and the upper part of the Sand Creek drainage, we have outstanding flies and lures only catch and release fishing for Rio Grande cutthroat trout. And actually, those two drainages might be some of the best fishing for Rio Grande cutthroat trout anywhere. And among the fly fishing communities, there's this desire for these, especially for these mountain trout fishermen, to go around and do what's called a cut slam, to catch one of every species of cutthroat trout throughout North America here. So, so they'll go and even some of the non-cutthroats like Gila trout. So they'll go catch a Lahontan cutthroat trout, a Snake River cutthroat trout, a Yellowstone cutthroat trout, Colorado River. I mean, there's several. They'll want to catch a bull trout, but these people love the idea of going around and exploring all these different areas to catch all the different types of trout in the West. So
Do you have the cutthroat slam?
Oh, no, I do not.
Is that a life goal of yours?
No, I get a lot of, I work, I spend a lot of time here in the San Luis Valley and don't get to travel much, but I do, it would be something for retirement maybe. So maybe I could,
Have you caught your fair share of cutthroat trout out here?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They're great. The fish here in the upper parts of the park and the beaver dams and stuff, they're pretty aggressive. They're really fun to catch. They'll take dry flies almost year round. So, well, not while the ice is on, but from ice off to ice on, they'll take dry flies, which that's kind of the most fun way to catch trout in the high country. So
I've unfortunately never fished a day in my life, and you seem pretty patient. So maybe I can convince you to take me out and teach me a thing or two one day.
No, I'm kind of a simpleton fly fisherman. I always the fly fisherman out there will get a check out. There's always an Adam's hatch going on. So
I do want to stress the importance, though, of something that you said of that all the fish out here are catch and release. How vital is it that visitors that do come here and recreate via fishing make sure that they catch and release and don't take any fish with them?
Yeah, along with just catching and releasing, I would say that that handling fish properly and because the Medano Primitive Road goes right along Medano Creek for a big portion of this important fishery. So if we had lots of people fishing and keeping fish, it could probably, it would negatively affect this population of fish. The Sand Creek drainage, I mean, it's geographically isolated so that it's hard to say on that, but we worked with Colorado Parks and Wildlife over the last couple of years to put these bag limits, so of 0 fish and flies and lures only on to make sure that they have time to recover. And there's no reason why in the future that we are just saying that in the future there might be a case where if this population's robust enough that we might be able to allow backpackers to take a fish or something like that. But as of right now, we don't have that. We don't have that luxury. We're really focused on making sure that these fish do recover and have time to acquire all those adaptations to live in a new place. So
I'm sure there's a lot of fishers listening to this episode, and they probably already know these techniques. But for those who are unfamiliar with fishing but might want to get into it and might want to try it in a place like Great Sand Dunes, what are some of those techniques you kind of just alluded to beyond catching and releasing? I know it's important to obviously not keep them out of the water for too long. How do you keep the fish safe when you are trying to catch and release?
Oh, so using a non-abrasive net to protect their scales is a big way to protect them, and make sure you wet your hands before you handle the fish so that you don't like people handle fish and they're like, oh, slime, but if you wet your hands first, you're not pulling that slime, which is the protective layer that keeps the outside keeps pathogens from invading that fish's skin and things. But the other thing is barbless hooks. When you're fishing in these catch and release areas, to go ahead and pinch your barb down. And if you are spin fishing, and that's perfectly okay to spin fish with not a fly rod, use single hooks and push your barbs down on those as well. Treble hooks are extremely kind of damaging to the fish's mouth and might give them a sore that could result in mortality later. So
I know one story with national parks, really anywhere you go, is when you go to the parks, you're supposed to clean your boots, you're supposed to clean your vehicle, so you're not introducing invasive species into a environment. Is the same with fishing poles?
It is absolute. It's not just with fishing poles, but that's one thing that I was remiss in not stressing, is that cleaning your waders and keeping whirling disease out of these waters is very important. So when you come to fish a new stream, it's important that you use a disinfectant like Lysol or a bleach solution to make sure that you're not bringing these the eggs of the tubiflex worms. It's the vector for that disease. And and same thing, like clean your fly line. It's a good practice anyway. So, but yeah, you'd want to make sure that you're not bringing things in from other areas. So
that's interesting. And you talked about how pristine the waters are here currently. They only stay pristine if people follow these types of measures, correct?
Exactly. Keeping things where they belong is very important to native fish restoration. So,
well, you do a lot more than just dealing with the fish here in restoration. You are a wildlife biologist. So what are some favorite stories that you've kind of experienced in the park that you think back on that you might be grateful for, or some of the wildlife that you've had the opportunity to interact with?
My favorite story here at Great Sand Dunes was right down here at Mosca Pass Trailhead at the intersection of the Wellington Ditch Trail and Mosca Pass Trailhead. We had a French tourist who was eyewitness to a lion predating on a mule deer, and it was super interesting because he went down to the visitor center after he experienced this and he was not a good English speaker, so he was really trying to explain to the interpretive staff what was going on. The cool thing about that is I went down there and found the predation site, and that the lion had done most of its work already, and I tried to put a camera on the remains of that mule deer so that I could get some pictures to interpret this happening at the park. But didn't the lion never came back? So the coyotes and the birds got the rest of that carcass, but that lion. So when you're looking around, if you visit Great Sand Dunes and you just look up the hill at the pinyon juniper woodlands and up higher into the spruce and aspen forests up there, we have world-class natural resources here, including lions, or mountain lions, not African lions, but mountain lions, bears. We have ring-tailed cats here, so if people know what those are, we have bighorn sheep. We have species that you would expect to see all the way up the Arctic Circle, like ptarmigan. We have pikas that live in the talus slopes, way up there at 12 and 13,000 feet. So this place is it's a very interesting, has a lot of interesting dynamics due to the fact that these are some of the steepest and tallest mountains in North America, and they drop off rapidly right here into this gap where the sand collected. So, yeah.
And you have pronghorn, which are some of the fastest mammals in North America, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. With we see them often right here off the visitor off the main road coming into the visitor center. Along with early morning is the time to do any wildlife viewing. So we'll often see elk, mule deer, pronghorn right here along the entrance center road early in the morning. When I come in at 6:30, I see them almost every day. But by the time we've had several thousand visitors come along the road, they've moved off. So yeah.
You mentioned earlier that your specialty in wildlife biology is with ungulates. What about them is special for you? And do you have any things facts-wise that you like to share about the ungulates in the park here?
So, and this is something that I would just like to share because I don't think that most people would see this as they drive into the entrance road. But right there on the west side of the dunes, to the south and the west, and even to the north of the dunes, there's a big area of this upland steppe and these wet meadows, and there we have probably 3,000 or 4,000 elk that use the park at least seasonally, at least a couple thousand of them that are residents here at the park, along with the pronghorn and the mule deer in the foothills. It's just an amazing place, and while the dunes are the main attraction here, the protection afforded by this national park for this 150,000 acres of park and preserve, it allows for some really cool things that it might look a lot like out there. There's also a herd of bison that's owned by the Nature Conservancy. So, and you might be able to see something that looks like very much like it did 8,000 years ago. See the whole suite of post-Pleistocene animals, just like people would have seen back then. So
you talked about there being 140 to 150,000 acres in the park. Off camera, we were talking a little bit, and you mentioned that visitors may use 4,000 to 5,000 of those acres. How do you get to these areas where the fish are to be able to enjoy that experience of just witnessing them or fishing?
Oh, okay. So the entrance road here, up to the campground and the beginning of the Medno Primitive Road is where the majority of our visitation is, which, lately it's been nearly somewhere around 500,000 people a year. But once you get outside of that little area, the one place to do some recreation, if you have a really good four-wheel drive, is up the Medno Pass Primitive Road, which leads over to the Wet Mountain Valley. So you're actually able to cross the Sangre de Cristo Mountains on this Jeep trail. It also allows access up to Medno Lake, up Medno Creek, away from the road. And the other, so there's two more places. The other option is to come in from the Wet Mountain Valley side to a place called Music Pass. You would access that from the Forest Service property from the east side of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. And the other way to get in to the backcountry is from the Liberty Trailhead, which is on the north side of the park from the town of Crestone. And those places will get you into the Great Sand Dunes Wilderness and the Sangre de Cristo Wilderness. So,
do you have a favorite place out of any of those areas you just mentioned to fish at?
Oh, to fish? Oh, the Upper Sand Creek Basin, the Upper and Lower Sand Creek lakes are starting to come back in since our restoration. They're amazing places to fish, and it's absolutely one of the most beautiful places that I've ever seen. So, looking from Music Pass over to Harris Peak is gorgeous, and seeing Harris Peak reflected in the lower lake, Lower Sand Creek Lake, is something that everybody should experience. So, but it's not easy. It's a 6-mile walk in to get there. So.
Well, I don't want to give away all your secrets, all your special places, but is there higher fish populations the further up you go into the mountains?
Oh, not really. No, as soon as you get to the mountain front, we have really robust populations from probably 9,000 feet, or maybe even, I'll say 8,500 feet, all the way up to the 12,500 foot range. So any place where those drainage, there's amazing fish to be seen in all those areas. So,
Well, as we wrap this up, being from Georgia and now spending a good portion of your life here at Great Sand Dunes, what is special about this place to you? What do you want people to know and share in the specialness that you feel about it?
Oh, it's just, it's this amazing panorama that you are able to see from here. You can see the snow-capped San Juans all the way across the valley floor, 60 miles away. The dunes themselves are they're a pretty impressive sight, and just the fact that we have all of this this mountainous land that's very generally, aside from right here in the developed area of the park, you could take a walk up any one of these canyons and not see another person for days on end. And aside from the airplanes flying over, you would have no indication of what year it is, which is pretty cool. So
yeah, do you enjoy those backcountry wilderness experiences?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you bring your kids, or do you like to go solo?
Oh, yeah, I do a little bit of both, but they're getting old enough now that we could do some backpacking but generally we've just enjoyed the front country camping. My older kids and I have done some. I've also have a 27 and a 25-year-old, so we've done a lot of backcountry stuff. My son and I packed burros into the backcountry of the San Juan Mountains, so that's one of my other enjoyments. So
that's awesome
with those. So
I'm sure that was a dream experience. Do you work frequently then with the burros?
Oh yeah, I own them, so we just go.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we do that.
Awesome. Well, Dewane, this has been amazing, and I'm glad you enlightened us on the fish in this landscape, because I think if you're a visitor and you only have a day or two here, you might not think of the fish that are here, but I'm glad we had a chance to talk about them.
Oh yeah, it's an amazing opportunity for even if you're not a fisher person, to just go if you have a 4-wheel drive, to go up there and just spend a little time looking down into the beaver ponds and watching them do their thing, watch them sipping insects off the surface of the water. It's pretty cool. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. It was a pleasure. So
thanks for checking out this edition of the Safe Travels podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. Dewane has done some incredible work at this park, and the fish restoration story is nothing short of amazing. So if you like this type of content, it would mean a whole lot to me if you liked, commented, and subscribed. And until next time, safe travels.